Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Catherine Bryla, the president of Sag Moraine Native Plant Community. We're thrilled that you've joined us, and we're thrilled that you've decided to become a member and support the mission of Sag Moraine. The mission of Sag Moraine is to advocate for the use of native plants in residential, commercial, and public landscapes. We believe that native plants are the foundation of our food chain and must become more widely utilized to improve the ecosystems that sustain all life. We strive to provide a fun, friendly, welcoming environment for all who share our commitment to restoring native plants. And the mission of our organization is not to uh, try to persuade people to plant meadows in their front yard or to do 20 hours of yard work every weekend. We feel that a lot of people doing small things, whether that be plant a native tree in your parkway versus a non-native, plant a viburnum instead of a forsythia, put a small pollinator garden in the back unused corner of your yard for our poor declining pollinators. Small things done by a lot of people is what's going to make a difference. Okay, some more exciting things that we have in the future for Sag Moraine. We hope to provide a lot of online learning opportunities for you. Eventually, if COVID ever goes away, we'll be doing some of those in person as well. But for the meantime, they'll be with Zoom webinars, with our members meetings, and with our social media. Eventually, we also want to become more of a socially active club and have some fun too, and meet people, and imagine that. We want to do some maybe bird watching trips, kayaking, hiking, picnics, things where we're outside enjoying in some of the beautiful natural areas in our area. We will give you assistance in obtaining and selecting native plants. And we have Kelsay here from Possibility Place Nursery that's going to be talking more about that later. So I'll get to that in just a couple minutes. We're going to be doing community outreach. We want to get the name out in our name out in the community, Sag Moraine, but more important, we want to get the mission out and the importance of native plants and the power that all of us as landowners have in healing our environment and our ecosystem. We want to sponsor projects and community gardens, and we want in the future to be able to do some nature appreciation experiences for not just adults, but also for children. We got big plans for 2021 and we're very excited, and we hope you are too, or at least you will be after tonight. But with big plans, we need a lot of people. So please consider volunteering for Sag Moraine. The more volunteers we have, the more native plants we can get in the ground, the more we can get the word out to the community. Whatever your gift is, whatever your interest is, we're going to be looking to expand the board in the future. We're going to be looking to plant gardens, plan garden projects. If you're good at tech, if you're good at social media, if you are like to organize events, or whatever is your calling, please consider volunteering. You can email us through the website or fill out the volunteer form. We'd love, the more of us, the better that get involved. That being said, I advanced the screen before I wanted to. I want to introduce some of our current volunteers that have been working hard to get Sag Moraine up and rolling. Myself, Mary Gelder, she's our vice president. Mary, can you pop on? Hello, Mary. We can't hear you, Mary.
Hi, everybody.
Is there anything you'd like to say, Mary?
Just glad to see everyone here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. And we have Peggy Connor. She's our treasurer.
Hi there, everyone.
Hello out there in Orland Park, Peggy.
We're all happy to be here from Orland. Maybe there's a few of us. We know that Orland has some interest in this, which is great. So anyways, I'm treasurer. I don't know why, but I'm a lifelong gardener, but have just been recently turned on by what we need to really do on our own property and our land for pollination and our ecosystem. So I'm really excited to be here. So thanks for all joining us too.
And Donna McCash, our secretary.
Hello. Thanks to everybody for coming. It's a nice group, lots of people signing in. So I'm anxious to hear what Kelsay has to say.
Great. Also not on video tonight, we have Evelyn Miller. She's our technical volunteer. And we also have Amanda McCash. She's our communications director. She handles all of our social media. And we have Kristen McCash. She's our program director. Kristen is an ecologist, and she does great work for us with research and blogs. And so we have a great team, and we want to expand that team. So join in. Lastly, some announcements. In the future, we're trying to plan what kind of meetings, how we want to run our meetings. We're going to be having regular webinars every month or so, educational webinars with guests. But our meetings will be, we're trying to gauge whether we should have member-only meetings. That the webinars will be for the community at large. The meetings will be just for members. And we're trying to gauge how often we should have them, what the best night is for everybody, what the best time is for everybody. So we have a poll that we would appreciate you filling out now. 3 questions, nice and simple, for your preferences for member meetings. I'll give everybody a couple minutes to do that. Okay, a few more seconds. I'm going to end the polling. And I'm going to share the results with you. So as you can see, most people prefer monthly. That's great. What time would you like the meetings to be? 7 o'clock seems to work best for people, so we'll keep it at 7. And Wednesday evenings seem to be a good middle of the week night for everybody, so we'll keep it on Wednesdays. That's terrific. Okay. So also for our member meetings, some of them will have guests like Kelsay, and we're excited about introducing him in just a second. Some of our meetings we would like, unfortunately, we can't share and get together and communicate with each other in person right now. Hopefully that will end soon, but we would like to get to know people better and share and learn from each other too. So we would like our meetings to also give all of the attendees and all of our members a chance to learn from each other, share with each other, show us what's going on in your yard, show us what your plans are, ask questions of each other. So if you would ever like to share some photos of your yard, some photos of your plants, some videos, and talk a little bit about it during one of our meetings, we would love that. We want to see what's going on in other people's homes and landscapes. So if you do have anything that you would like to share, you can forward that to our program director, Kristen McCash, at sagmoraine.org. You can see her email there. Send it to her, and then we'll give you the platform to talk a little bit during our meetings, and we'll show your pictures or videos. Our next event, so I will probably be planning our next member meeting for the middle of March, because the second Wednesday of the month seems to be where we were falling in, but on March 10th, we have a webinar for the community Members will always go for free, but we will put this out for the entire community with Kim Eierman of Eco Beneficial. She's a fantastic speaker, and she's going to teach us how to create gardens tailored to our native pollinators in order to fight pollinator decline. So that will be on March 10th, and you'll be able to see more information of that on our social media, and we will be sending you Zoom links for that if you sign up. We need you to go to our website or our social media and sign up for that webinar. Again, that will be free for members, but just so we know to send you the Zoom link that you would like to attend. I'm going to introduce now our guest. But before I do, I want to say that after Kelsay talks and answers questions, if any of you have any questions for myself or anybody else from Sag Moraine, we'll stick around as long as you're willing to stick around and answer any questions or hear any ideas that you have for the group too. Which reminds me, during this evening, if there's any ideas of educational topics you would like, future social events you would like, anything, any ideas you have for the group, please put it in chat. We love people's ideas and we want to get the engagement of as many people as possible. That being said, I want to introduce our special guest, Kelsay Shaw from Possibility Place Native Plant Nursery in Monee, Illinois. We are so fortunate to have Possibility Place as a resource, and Possibility Place and Sag Moraine are teaming up to try to make it easier to try to get more native plants in our landscapes. We'll be having a link. We do have a link on our website, and we'll be having a link on our Facebook where you can go through our link to Possibility Place website, purchase plants there, have them shipped to you, and Sag Moraine's going to get a portion of the sale to help us continue bringing programs and events and gardens and the whole myriad of things to the community. So with no further ado, Kelsay from Possibility Place Nursery, Kelsay Shaw, thank you for joining us. And I'm going to give you the screen.
Well, thank you
It's
very
all
much.
yours.
Got it. Let me just share the screen really fast so we get this started. Well, come on, there we go. Hi, everybody. I am Kelsay, and if I happen not to be looking directly at you, that's mostly because I can't see my camera all that well, so I might be drifting. There we go. All right. My name is Kelsay. I'm with Possibility Place Nursery, and tonight I'm going to be discussing the general topic of transitioning a normal yard, something that you would find under most urban circumstances, into one that is more biologically diverse, how to switch from a non-native yard to at least a native inclusive yard, so that you have an opportunity to invite organisms and experience nature closer to home, rather than just having to go, out to the local forest preserve. You can actually interact with it at your house. I'm going to be speaking generally tonight, and I will ask that if anybody has questions, please throw them into the chat. I'm going to pull it up at the end, and we'll be calling on you individually to talk to us, so that I can field your questions. And please hold your questions till the end. And please, no questions about your yards in particular. Generally speaking, yes, I'm very happy to answer them. But if you have a very particular question, we'll maybe give you a phone number where you can give me a call and we can discuss your yards individually later. So, no further ado, my talk tonight is called The Big Switch: Transitioning to a Native Plant Garden. Now, most people that are involved in, natural communities such as this have a general idea of what it means to transition to or use native plants in their garden. But it's kind of a misunderstood concept. Most people who are native people tend to think that there's only one way to be. You can only go native, period. That's all you can plant. When the reality is that there are many shades of how you can utilize natives in your landscape. If you have an ornamental need, there is a native for it. However, there is no absolute when it comes to the native plant integration. Now, I would encourage you to go freaking bananas and plant as much as you humanly possibly can do. However, you have to understand that if there is a line that a lot of people come to, they are willing to go so far and no further. That's fine too, as long as you're using non-native species in a responsible way. But we have to kind of consider how things are done in the urban landscape today. And most people, when they think of a yard, they do certain types of things. And it's not just yards in which you see this kind of thing. You know, you'll see it at businesses where situations like this are commonplace, where they imprison their plants as far away from wherever they're putting them in as possible. And then they mow the grass around it, but imprison the people so they can't actually get out to enjoy the material itself. I personally love this. This particular place, you know, they mow the grass like they're going to throw picnics in the ditch. So it's a weird, it's a lost opportunity to do something better. And when you can do something better, I recommend it. Because when you don't, you end up with parking islands that look like, well, this is a mess. But this is common. This is what we have all throughout northeastern Illinois and beyond. You know, you have issues or homeowners will actually plant things that die, and then this particular person, we'll put it this way, they do the same thing over and over and over again. This particular person, you can see all the stakes, right? There are 4 of them, I believe. Might be 3. No, there are 4. Every stake represents a time that this person tried to replace this tree with the exact same one. So I was a neighbor of this person. They put in, the first time they put it in, there was 1 stick. The second time they put it in, there was 2 sticks. And it kept on going. I believe it got up to 6 because clearly it was blowing over too much. Either that or it was trying to escape. There are other larger missed opportunities where, you know, you put in these giant green monsters, and I realize why people do that. They want privacy, but the low biological mix of these particular sites, and not only that, but the mowing on the side of the outside of this particular thing where no one is going to see it, it represents even greater loss. When you only have 1 plant and you start to say something were to come, these are all going to time out at roughly the same age, which means that you're going to have 2, 3, 4 die at a time, which means you're going to have gaping holes. Instead of being able to fill it with a more balanced native mix of species, you have I think this is green giant, but an overall loss. Nothing is going to utilize this border in a reasonable way. And the mowed grass, mowing grass and why? Or even better yet, when plantings aren't to scale, where people move to the country, but they keep the same scale of planting. This magnolia is one of those varieties that only get about 8 to 10 feet tall. It's a shrub. And they planted it 200 feet from their front door, and they were going to enjoy it from there. It doesn't make sense. So, but this is commonplace. This is what we see everywhere we go. Overuse of evergreens, huge mowed areas. That pond is the part that makes me crazy, though, because you look at it and that should have hibiscus and burr reed and carex along the banks, making it beautiful and flowery. But instead, they've got rocks that, if my children lived there, they'd all be in the water by now. Or this one, my personal favorite, which is surprisingly common. This is a 3-acre site and it's nothing but mowed grass. And I'm not entirely sure why people do this, but every time that I see it, I always wonder about the psychology of why we maintain these grass, these big barren grass areas. And I know it's goes pretty deep. The psychiatrist that I was talking to says it goes way back to when we were, running away from lions and all that kind of stuff, where we wanted to be able to see everywhere. But we're clearly not running from lions anymore. And having this type of yard, I'm told, is low maintenance, but you got to get out there and mow this thing. I mean, look at this. That takes time. And if I had planted half of it in a native garden, I got to spend a couple hours a year. So, I mean, the quality of my life is diminished because I'm on a riding lawnmower. And to view using natives as not only good for the environment, but life improving, it is a concept that most people have not come around to. And I hope that I can represent that articulately tonight. The other big knock is natives aren't pretty. And I always ask this, and nobody's going to clearly be able to answer me tonight, but show me the non-native. There's only one of them here. And usually about 2 out of 10 people get it right on the first go. Now, if anybody wants to throw into the comments, we can go from top right to bottom right in a circle, starting with 1 and ending with 6. You guys tell me which one you think, and we'll do that at the end. But it is one of those things that always kind of chaps me when you have an opportunity to use a native, but you don't because it's not pretty. But when you compare them side by side, people can't tell me the difference. Or they say, well, there's this one, it's better. Now, the one on the right is the better one. That is Diablo. It's a 9 bark. And this is the way it looks, period. You can tell me it looks great in the pot, but that's just the way it is. And on the left is a 5 foot tall, the one on the right, 6 foot. So it's not apples to apples. It's a foot shorter. But the one on the left is the native variety at the same time of year. You can see that there are more flowers. It's more vibrant. It has a more alive look to it. Whereas, the Diablo, the one that's popular in the trade, well, frankly, it looks like hell. It's hard to maintain a cultivar, and we'll get into that later, because remember, there are no nativars. A nativar is a classy way to take more money from you as a shopper. So it's a cultivar. Anybody that says nativar, you're like, thank you, I'm going elsewhere. Because it's garbage. It's a cultivar. It's not something that is in nature on purpose. There are naturally occurring hybrids. There are small populations that occur, but generally speaking, those are very specialized to a particular area. And when you plant them everywhere, you push down the genetic variability that's important for populations to survive. So it's not just that you're planting natives, it's that you're planting natives that are from seed or from various sources, so that when they flower and they go, the pollen is carried out into the world, that it doesn't diminish the populations that are naturally existing around you. The more wild the source, the better the material is for your local area, especially if you can get it as regional as possible. And that can be very difficult, but you have to try the best you can. Now, when I try to get people to utilize natives, I lay these things out as clear as possible. And I may be talking very, very quickly right now. My apologies. But we have to challenge, ourselves. And we have to overcome some of the challenges in converting our lawns. Usually, the conventional landscape, it's not about species use. It's about cultivar use. And so when you are utilizing native species, you are trying to diversify by using different genuses and different species. Well, you could say that I have 5 different kinds of, maple tree in my yard, but they're all a variety of sugar maple. So there really isn't any difference across the board. You just spent a lot of money on 5 trees that are all the same. The other problem is that when you are doing your shopping, the information that's available about natives, how to identify them, while it has become more available, it is difficult for gardeners to use scientific manuals to break down what that information is. And while we're all, we'll call it versed in plants, when it comes to individual yards and the little differences that make my yard good for a particular species, but my neighbor's yard not, and why that is, can be very tough to figure out. And so, while that information on natives has boomed, it's mostly on color. If you pick up a native book or a gardening book that's about natives, they'll flip it open and all the orange pictures are together. All the pink pictures are together. Even when you're going for butterflies, the list of native butterfly plants usually includes about 1/3 non-native species. Why? So when we're utilizing this and trying to break this information down, it's not, even though there's more of it, it's not as useful as we might like to think. Experts in the native field have improved, but like people like Doug Ptolemy, people like myself, there was a person coming in next week who's going to be doing a pollinator talk, or next month, who's going to be coming. There are a variety of voices out there, even on the radio. Oh my God, I can't remember why I just had a brain fart. Anyway, there are voices for native plants out there, and they are getting louder. People are hearing them. But usually what happens is the access to these people is not great. So when you have an opportunity to speak to them, it can be very time consuming because the questions that you have are large. They take time to kind of like filter out what you're looking for and get you a positive answer. And it's not really the expert's fault that they can't make themselves available because, like I said, that utilization of time, there's only so much of it. And when you have so many people now interested in it, even posting talks and writing papers, it is only helpful so far, where your particular needs may not be as met as you would like. And don't be mad at us. We do try. And that kind of ties into this. So when you ask your questions, you come in with huge expectations about what native plants can do and what their possibilities are. And it's very important to minimize and realize that I have to rein in my expectations, because when I plant a plant, just because a native is suited for my area does not mean that I can't water it, or that I shouldn't fence it because the rabbits are going to come in and clean me out, or that I shouldn't put mulch down, or that I shouldn't still weed until my plants have gotten to mature size. There's still gardening practices that you need to do. A lot of people back in the 80s and 90s, I don't know if everybody remembers this or not, but they used to plant the corner prairie, usually a triangle or a rectangle. Railroad ties were popular at the time, and they cram them into a corner, and they throw in 3 different species of native plant. And then after about 3 years, most of them were dead. And they said, it's all weedy. I knew it. I'm not bothering with this stuff anymore. And they didn't rein in their expectations, nor did they try to care for it in a responsible gardener way. Even though they mowed all the grass around it, they weed whipped the heck out of those railroad ties, kept them pretty, but they didn't spend the time on the plants themselves. So we have to make sure that when we do use natives, that we aggressively try to care for them until the establishment period is over. And it depends on the species. You know, an oak tree is going to take probably 5 or 10 years to become established in a reasonable way. So when we go into drought, watering is still appropriate. Choosing better species for my yard is going to help on every level. But we also have to kind of keep in mind that the material itself is still going to need our help. And I think I mentioned this, all right. I might be beaten on this one a bit. Nativars are not a thing. It's a cultivar, okay? And because they become trendy, you have to be very, very careful. My favorite example, well, it's not my favorite, but it's an example, is the hydrangeas. There are hundreds of Hydrangea Arborescens varieties out there. 98% of them are pure, unadulterated garbage. And this is not me speaking. Well, it is. But I've heard from far too many people who have small garden centers that talk about the complaints that they get because the hydrangeas that are available that, you know, their customers demand, they look great in the pot, but the work that the garden center has to do to keep them green and keep them happy looking is twice the amount of work that they have to put into keeping the straight species that's right next to it available. And because it doesn't have quotes in the name, it doesn't move. And with that trendiness, people think that they're the same thing, that if I plant this nativar, I'm doing just as good, when really it is retarding local populations genetically and not offering pollinators, not offering birds who then forage, the same kinds of opportunities that would be available if you use the native straight species that would be more suited to your yard, be sturdier, be prettier. Now, that all being said, how do you make a switch? What do you do? What's the first thing you do? Well, the first thing you do is identify where you live. Now, we all know where we live. We're here. We're in our house. But we have to take it as a more regional look. If you are on a particular watershed, I happen to be on the DuPage and Des Plaines watersheds. I straddle both of them where I currently live. So my soils are different than where our nursery is over in Monee, which is on the Fort Creek watershed. So that's going to be far more clay, where I'm raised up and I have more black soil, more forest type soil, and the nursery has more prairie type soil. So you have these kinds of differences. So when we would plant something at the nursery, prairie and savanna species go absolutely berserk. When we're at my house, I can get away with more sensitive woodland material. Now, there's only 30 miles between us. However, it makes a big difference. Where you live is important to identify. If you're low, and I have no way of pointing, but if you're low down here by the dam, low in the watershed, where your soil is going to be wetter longer, you're going to have opportunities to grow species that are less drought tolerant. That if I lived on top of the hill in the background, then I'm going to be looking to make sure that I am planting species that are going to be drought tolerant. Because when a drought comes, and it does come, the material is going to respond very, very positively. And then if I live in town or in the city, I'm going to have to further restrict the species that are available to me unless I do some severe amendments to my soils and make sure that the site itself, because you're going to have more inorganic shade in these particular areas, that you're going to be able to establish plants that are going to be healthy for you. So if I think I'm going to grow blueberry in town rather than out in the woods behind the farm over there, I have to do much more in town to make it a plant that I'm going to be able to enjoy and harvest and enjoy its beauty than if I just went out and planted it under the trees on some farm someplace. Different types of plants are more sensitive that way, and we have to be aware of that. So understanding where you live is the first step. The second step is your particular site. All right. Now, some of you, you're going to be wet over there. And some of you are going to be dry over here. Some of you are going to have sun down there. Some of you are going to be in the shade over here. And some of you are going to have a little mix of everything. You know, the front yard's going to be in full sun, but the backyard's in complete shade. That's when you start, digging deeper into your soil. Some of you are going to be very, very wet. So identifying your very, very local conditions is the next step, and identifying the types of species that are going to be important to your yard and give you overall success. Because what you're looking for is success. If I can't plant this particular type of liatris, then I plant a different one that is more adapted to my particular soil type and more adapted to my particular conditions in my yard. And I'll give you an example of this. This was a client of mine, and he lived up against a state park. It's a local state park south of the city, and you can see that it's a McMansion. Nothing special here. This yard represents everything, every bad practice of urban living is represented right here in front of you. And this was what I was given to start with. Now, this person has had some money, so we were able to do things that maybe some people wouldn't be able to do on a larger scale. However, little scale, little steps, there's nothing wrong with any of that. We just build on what we can. But this particular set of conditions shocked me. When I pulled up and he says, yeah, I want to go all native. I want to blend into this state park behind me. I'm looking at his yard and I thought he was absolutely crazy, because I said, you know what kind of work that this is going to take. And I take my hat off to this gentleman every time. He and his wife went completely crazy. I mean, the things that we had to get rid of to start with just blew my mind. Hosta planted in full sun. You can't tell, but most of that mulch is gravel. That river rock stuff, because, rocks, they help with moisture. But it was one of those things where I was staggered. And this was my favorite plant. When I pulled up to the yard, I pulled over and I got out and I looked at it. And initially I'm like, oh, great. Somebody nuclearized a buckthorn. And I said, I have to figure out what this is. And I couldn't do it. I absolutely couldn't do it. He comes out of the house and he says, hi, he gives me his name and we talk. And I said, I don't know what that is. He goes, neither do I. I go, why did you clip it like that? And he looks at me, he goes, oh, no, that's the way it was. So I've kept it that way. So that's kind of built into what we were talking about earlier. People have always done it this way. So this is what it is. So he just kept on doing it. And I said, well, do me a favor. Don't. And let's see what happens. And I kick myself every day because I never got the after picture of this. It grew 8 feet in the next 3 months. And it looked like a plant that was having some kind of nervous breakdown. But it turned out it was a black haw viburnum. It flowered, looked beautiful. We even planted underneath it because it was just one of those things. I didn't have the heart to rip it out. So, there's these weird kind of things that people just do. There was the dead plant down here in front is an oak leaf hydrangea that they planted where they dumped snow. Bad conditions. And we went from that to this. Now, we did this in 14 months. Now, that's very, very quickly. But like I said, this guy spent money. It was his thing. We planted 10 trees in this horseshoe. The horseshoe itself, 60 feet across by 70, I think it was 75 feet deep. And we put 10 oaks in this ring. Now, to normal convention, that would be too much. We'll get into spacing a little bit later, but that's all nonsense. But all of this occurred in that 14-month period. He went from 8 species, including daffodils and tulips, so really 6, to I think 36 species in that time. Now we kept it very orderly. We kept it, so that things didn't get out of hand. It was still a driveway, but we managed it in a way that made nature to these particular people beautiful. And we still had species integration where things could bleed over and move around and still have your overall landscape coherence. He called me back a while later and said he wanted to do the same for his ditch. I said, that's great. I said, how big is it? He goes, about 12 feet wide by 300 feet long. And I said, 250 feet long. And I said, that's going to be a lot of plants. He said, yeah, it'll be fine. So we did it. And this ditch saw more neighborhood action than this neighborhood has ever seen. There were neighbors out protesting the ditch. They called the state DNR and told the state that that he was interfering with the flow of water from the neighborhood into the state park. So the DNR sent a truck out, and one morning he's having his coffee, and we had done all this planting. And again, I think we went with about 40 species total, including trees and some shrubs on this whole thing. And then the DNR came out and they said they were parked out there and they were just idling by the ditch. And he had grabbed his cup of coffee and he said, I just tied up my robe and I went out and I was going to talk to him. I said, great. What happened? He goes, well, I went out, they rolled down the window and they said, can I help you, sir? And I go, no, your neighbors have been complaining, but if you want to keep planting like this, we fully support it, but we have to be seen. So we're going to stay another 10 minutes and then we're leaving just so we know that some of the neighbors see that we were here looking at it. He goes, but none of this is a problem for us. In fact, because of what you've planted here, when this sets seed, it's going to carry it into the state park and further enrich our particular planting along here, which has been that ditch had been degraded for years. So we're very pleased with what you're doing. Keep it up. Now, you'll notice that the fencing there, he did have deer problems, and something to keep in mind when you're doing large scale plantings, especially those of you with a little bit larger pieces of property where you're going to have to fence out the deer. You're going to have to imprison your plants for the first season or two, or until they have fully rooted into the ground. If you don't do that, you'll have plugs and plants all over the yard because deer are jerks. Now, you have to kind of realize that he's an extreme case. So what is possible when you are trying to convert your yard over to the use of natives? Well, you can go full on, bonkers and just say, I can't grow grass because the shade's too deep. I'm going to put in a walkway. That's it. And you can go that route. Or you can plant up the edge of ponds and stuff like that. Guess which neighbor had the goose poop problem? The guy with the rocks, if anybody's guessed and wanted to guess. Or you can plant up your alleyway that you do not want to mow anymore. Work with existing landscape features and just cram as many native species in there as you can to try and do something with it. Or you can plant it on your roof. He's a fun guy. Now, but maybe this is all a bit much. Maybe you want to kind of step into this, and you can absolutely do that. Carrick's lawn replacement, using natives to replace lawn grass is becoming a kind of a popular trend. One that I actually fully embrace. I'm doing it at my house, not successfully so far, but you know, I'm working at it. But you're trying to just make sure that it is something that you no longer have to do. And if you do it right, you can have 6 to 8 inches of grass, which you can still mow, by the way, and turn it into a beautiful field that looks great from afar. You know, there are all kinds of levels. You know, if you wanted to integrate, you know, larger trees and put things into your landscape that you may not think is possible, it is absolutely possible. You just have to be responsible in the way that you choose the material that you're using. Here's some helpful tips. So for anybody that wants to, I'm going to leave this up. If anybody can do a screen grab on this slide and the next one, these are kind of some helpful tips on spacing. The first figure is the most important one on how to figure out how many plugs in a native prairie garden or woodland garden or something like that that you're looking to plant. You take your square feet and you divide it by 2.25. And that is a plant on 18-inch centers. And for those of you that have never worked that way before, 18-inch centers means there's plant here, and in the center of the other plant, 18 inches away, there's another one. And then you create this pattern or grid that you can then exponentially expand. The smaller the number you divide by, the closer the plants get together. For example, if you're dividing by 2, it's on 12 inches or 12 and a half inches on center. So that looks about 12 inches. And that'll help you. Arranging plants into a grid, especially your graminoid species. The graminoid species are your grasses, your caryxes, your rushes, things like that. And then you can actually use the space inside the grid, the squares. You can actually plant your flowering plants in between, therefore doubling up your density, because native plants are built to grow together. They will not crowd each other out. And if we have other questions on this one, we can pull it up again later. When it comes to woody species, a couple of key things to keep in mind. That the shrub, a general shrub, is going to need about 12 square feet to get established. So if you're laying out a grid, usually don't go any closer than this. 3 to 4 foot centers are typical when planting shrubs. Now, the bigger the shrub, sometimes the further they want to get apart. You don't need to, but like I said, this is the minimum distance that we're talking here, all right? But with trees, it's about 40 square feet. So about 12 to 20 foot on center is kind of the bare minimum. But with trees, I will say this, if you've gone to the woods, there are clearly no gnomes or fairies or sylvans that are running around that, you know, move things to the perfect distance. I have right out my window here that you can't see, I have 2 white oak that are on, they're 30-inch plus oaks, and they are on 18-inch centers. So they're right up next to each other, and they do not care because they don't. And there is no right or wrong way on how to space or arrange these things. If you want to put the short stuff at the back and the tall stuff at the front, I mean, I wouldn't, but you can absolutely do that. You know, you can plant things in front of your windows or don't. There is no wrong way to address this, but you need to make sure that when you lay your plan out, it has some cohesion. It's tied together from one end of your garden to the other. There are certain species that carry it across, and it gives you a visual pleasure when viewing it, because now I can look here and have familiarity over there. So as long as I can find some common element when I'm doing my plans, no matter how I do them, right or wrong, I can tie that whole yard together. Now, spacing. There are 5 bur oak in that 40 square feet that we were talking about. Now you can't see one of them because it's right immediately behind the one in the front, but there are 5 of them there. This is not bad. There's nothing wrong with this. Arborists would lose of their mind with this. You got to have them spaced because then they don't develop properly. It's all nonsense. Trees develop the way they develop because of the space that they're given, not because if you give them open space, they develop perfect. They don't. They develop the way they need to. And if anybody has any questions on why trees grow the way they do, I recommend a book called The Hidden Life of Trees. I don't have that in the slides, but I do recommend that. Ptolemy's books are good. And then there's also an identification book by a Dr. Sally Weeks that I recommend for those that are trying to introduce themselves to what trees and shrubs do and are in our region. But when it comes to spacing on this level, this is perfectly fine. I have planted bur oak that are alive today, almost 30 years ago. In Wilmington, they are now about 20 inches across each, and I planted them 18 inches away from each other, and they are now touching at the base. And the plants are fully developed. And the crowns, and this is unusual, are fully integrated, which means that they actually cross themselves up. Usually, when trees are grown like this, they develop what's called crown shyness. So if you were actually to walk into the middle of this little group, you could look up and see the outline on a sunny day of the crowns of each individual tree with very few crossovers. It's because they talk to each other in a way we clearly do not understand. But again, spacing is, well, frankly, spacing is for the weak. You don't have to worry about it. It's not something that is horribly concerning. Now, I mentioned plant protection earlier. The reason why we do plant protection, and you can see it here, and a lot of people say, oh, it's an eyesore. Well, that's taken it about 10 feet away, and you do clearly see the stake, but the fencing itself isn't all that easy to see at 10 feet. But the reason why we do it is so stuff like this doesn't happen. And this is a pawpaw, and a deer came along and chewed the head off a pawpaw. And I don't know if anybody here is familiar with pawpaw, Semina triloba, but when you scrape the bark, it smells like tuchus. It's terrible. And they just ate it to the ground. But really, pawpaw, it's going to come back. Carpinus, it'll come back. Great. It's not going to look great. But what you're really trying to avoid is this. Plants don't come back from this. If you let animals come in and get to your plants before establishment, they will annihilate them. For most of us that live in urban areas that don't have a wide floristic balance, when you plant natives, it's like ringing a dinner bell and throwing, stakes out into the yard. You have to be a little bit on the careful side in open spaces. You can spray, that's fine, but you have to remember, you have to reapplicate that often until, this plant has become fully, itself. And every time it rains, you're still going to have to do it. And I will tell you this, that spray, if you have a cut on your hand, if you get it, accidentally in your eye, it is the worst thing ever. It's awful. It burns. It smells terrible. You can't, you'll go and have nightmares of it in your sleep. I recommend fencing. It's the least invasive. It is mechanical, but it's reusable on every level. So this is a recyclable material that you can use the next planting, and you can use it again. Planting tubes and other forms of plant protection are definitely usable, but if you use fencing, it allows the most light and does the job that you're looking for it to do with the least amount of fuss. So why convert in the first place? Now, for those of you that were at Doug Ptolemy's talk last month, like 2 weeks ago, right? Anyway, for those of you that saw that talk, you have a general idea. But really, what you're trying to do is not just landscape for yourself. You're trying to build from the ground up to have a broader biological base available to you for your enjoyment, but not just because you like to enjoy it. You're not going to eat these things, but what you're looking for is to invite an element that you don't normally see in your yard. People are big on monarchs or the Luna moth here, but people don't really know the snout or Vanessa down here in the corner, the American painted lady. They are very host specific. The snout is very specific to hackberry. So having a hackberry tree in your neighborhood or in your yard helps these particular species. Vanessa, or the American painted lady in the bottom there, she is all about Antennaria or pussy toes. So planting that and having this low creeping, very beautiful, tiny, diminutive perennial in your yard further brings in not only the blooms of the flower, but the butterfly that gives it extra color over a longer period of time. So you have these interactions, but further, you then feed these guys. Snakes eat invertebrates that would be in the garter snake there. They eat slugs. Now it's a big female. She lives in my yard. We haven't named her yet, but she's an angry one. We just let her be. But, she does a lot of work for me and I don't have to pay her. Gets rid of slugs out of my garden. When mice become a problem, she's big enough. She takes on a couple mice. It's great. I have bats. I have 4 species of bat that roost in my yard. It's fantastic. At the nursery, we've got killdeer and nighthawk. And this guy down here in the left, that's a hatchling cedar waxwing. You have the opportunity, if you build from the ground with flowers and trees and things like that, that you are going to easily maintain in your own yard, you make your yard beautiful on levels that you may not fully appreciate. Because when you have these guys come and visit, you have different and weirder friends than you know. Now, there are other benefits to converting to native materials, but not all of them are in your yard. For those that are joining plant community-based groups like this, you have certain kinds of opportunities, like plant sales, for public engagement, making natives available to a broader audience that normally wouldn't do that. These become events because people, where can I get these? Oh, you know what? Every May, so-and-so holds a plant sale. We're going to that. And that's where we get our native plants for the year. People that don't know plants at all are carrying out boxes full. Fantastic. You have community engagement. You can, this is a rain garden done at an elementary school on the near south side of Chicago. You have these wonderful little opportunities to engage people and enjoy the work. And on a more selfish note, you can engage your own children. It's like, family photo time. This is better than any staged shot you're going to get if, as long as you have this particular flower, and this is spring beauty, by the way, in your yard. And you can just have it growing in your grass. You just don't mow it for the first 2 or 3 weeks of the year. So you have these opportunities that utilizing native species in creative ways and reach out to a public that is going to embrace them, even if they don't know why. It is much more beneficial, and switching over your particular yard as a shining example in your neighborhood is far more important than you may realize. I'm at a corner in my neighborhood. A lot of people stop in front of my yard when my hibiscus is flowering in the ditch. Now, I'm breaking county code by having a 6-foot flower, all over my ditch, but people stop and they smell the flowers, and I encourage it. It's something that helps engage your neighbors in a way that is far more beneficial long term. Even if not all of them do it, there's going to be a couple, and those couple lead to others. And if we can embrace natives and engage them in creative ways and make our yards examples to them, you will have far-reaching effects that go beyond the edge of your yard. Your yard is part of that bigger space that we talked about in the beginning. And being able to build small pieces first will help our local environments flourish in ways they haven't in a long, long time. And if we don't get on it, frankly, we're going to have some trouble. So I'm hoping that this was, helpful to you. And you have to realize that there is every level. This was a backyard of a customers of ours who backed up to a creek. Didn't want to mow it because the mower got stuck. So then don't mow it anymore. The opportunity and the kinds of plants that you choose are yours. You just have to understand that the situation for them is what's important. And if you can match them up, you're good to go. Does anybody have any questions? I don't know how to, let's see here. Stop sharing. Oh my goodness. So how do we want to do this? Anybody? Bueller? Everybody's on mute, so I can't hear a word.
Hey, Kelsey, a couple people had questions in the chat. I'll just read some.
All right, you want to help? Yeah, point them out for me.
Yeah.
And can we unmute those particular people when their question comes up? Is that possible, everybody? Okay.
So this is from Susan Michael. Need help in selecting plants for shade. We have a lot of large oaks, etc. Do you do on-site or virtual property consultations?
With COVID, who is that person?
This is Susan Michael.
Susan Michaels.
You can talk now, Susan.
Hi there.
Hi, Susan. Your particular, that's kind of a larger thing about a particular yard. When you have large overstory oaks, you can use, on our website, we do have like a plant finder that might be able to help you out a little bit. I do virtual consultations, or I'm actually setting up to do them going into the spring. That's irritating. There we go. Going into the spring, and I'm hoping that it'll be helpful. So have some pictures ready and call my office, and we can share via email, and then have a talk about what that might mean for your plant selection. Where do you live?
Lamont.
Lamont. Okay, so you're on that weird soil over there. Are you on top of the bluff, or are you down the slope?
No, we're closer to the interexchange by 355 and 127th Street. Our property is fairly unique. There's just a few that are like this. We have a 3/4 acre and it's all wooded. So the
Okay.
front looks like suburbia with grass and a sidewalk. But in the back, we got a creek and a lot of large oak trees. And
Okay.
in
So-
the very rare, we've got sun because we had hawthorns that died out. That's where I was thinking of putting in a butterfly garden. But anyway, I wanted to find out.
No, and that'll be fine. So what we'll do is take some pictures, reach out to us via the contact form on my website. It says contact, and
Okay.
we can start a dialogue that way, and I can help maybe develop a list for you of local species that would be all right. But we're gonna have to identify your soil and include a look down so I can link to like Google and take a look at the property. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I'll talk to you. It's sometime in the future. All right.
Okay. Any particular month you think would be best?
You know what? Between now and March is fine.
Okay.
I've got nothing to do.
Okay, good. I mean, I don't want to try to, entertain your attention when you're super busy, but I didn't know if it.
No, this is what I do. It's all right.
Okay. Sounds
be
great.
all right.
Thank you.
All right. Who's next?
Yeah, and just for everybody here, it's a good idea to use the contact form to get a hold of Kelsey. That's the fastest way that you can, and he can prioritize those messages. But also just make sure that when you are ready to buy, that you buy through the Sag Moraine link. so that, yeah, the 10% can go back and fundraise your lovely organization. Yeah, okay, so next question we
Who's
have.
this? Who's Julie Will?
She's very active here.
All right, where's Julie?
There she is. Let me unmute Julie. Where'd you go, Julie? I saw you and now you ran away.
Oh, did she bail on us?
She had a question about city development committees. So she asked, is there any, I can't find the exact question, but she pretty much asked, is there any like sort of competition or award to have cities compete for the title of like native pollinator friendly? I just quickly found something called Monarch City USA.
Yeah, there's also the Xerxes Society. There's Tree City USA that a lot of, especially cities with arborists will, they'll be going after. Audubon International, or excuse me, Audubon USA has that. But locally, the Conservation Foundation, they've got programs for individual homes and for cities. For grant money, that's a great thing to do. Individually speaking, if you're looking for a panel or a plaque, then fine. But generally speaking, you do it what's best for you before you go after some of this stuff, because a lot of it is you pay for the plaque, that kind of thing. However, there are organizations like Audubon that do award grant money to individual towns for bird-friendly habitat, which effectively is pollinator-friendly habitat. Oh, and while I'm going there real fast, pollinator-friendly habitat is all native species. Doesn't matter what it is. Oak trees are the best without equal. So if you don't have an oak tree yet, start there. But if you're going to go after some of this stuff, the grant money is with Audubon and the Forest Service of all places. They offer city grants for trees through Student Conservation Corps, through organizations like Open Lands. Julie, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Okay, where are you located?
Naperville.
Naperville. If you're in Naperville, I would hold on. Naperville, the Conservation Foundation is going to help you find grant money, especially if you're on a tree committee or something like that. They do a lot of demographic work and grant writing, and they really love to get involved in that kind of thing. They've got some very dedicated people over there that would do good work. I think it's Jim Kleinwalter that does the local outreach. But if you can, and you're looking for, and you want to unleash an inner dork, then you want to get Jamie Viebach out there, because then you can just, if it after the plants, you can start talking about Star Wars. She's a riot.
Oh, great.
So, but that's where I would start. The Audubon and the Conservation Foundation are the ones that would have local grant money. And I think the grant window ends in March. So you might be a little late this year.
Oh.
Usually the grant writing starts in October through November, and they're being judged right now. And I think they're usually awarded within the next month or two.
Thank you.
But it's been a long time since I've written a grant, so sorry.
I also linked everybody here to Homegrown National Park, which is Doug Tallamy's organization. So it's not an award or anything, but it's kind of fun because you can actually put yourself on a physical map there and post pictures. And he's all about, just sharing kind of in a social media fashion, just having people get on the map and get excited looking at other people's gardens. So I thought that could be fun because, it is still a garden club.
Yeah, fair enough. There, the other one to look for that actually does very good work for anybody that likes plants, that get the butterfly wayside thing, is the Xerxes Society. They're broken up by region, so that helps out a lot. When you have the national ones, it's just a national one. They don't really give a damn about the local setup. Look for organizations that have For those of you that like that kind of thing, I mean, I have a couple myself, but usually because I talked to the group and they gave me one as kind of like a consolation prize. You want to make sure that you find somebody that has as local a base as possible, because they're usually the ones that are going to tie you into networks of people, suppliers, and grant money that is going to be more local for what you're trying to do. Getting city development and municipalities involved, you're going to have some kind of money for them that they cannot then utilize somewhere else. You want to make sure that whatever group that you're getting involved with, that there are certain benchmarks that are going to be set up for the money that you're going to get for your project. And you have to make sure that the city is willing to invest in that project. So if you have a dedicated group of individuals, you can make a big difference, but you have to make sure that the city then respects what the project is. Naperville is going to be not hard because they do spend a lot of money. Julie was an example of what I'm thinking. However, you want to make sure that takes a much longer period of time with municipalities like that, where if I were in Batavia, it'd be a hell of a lot easier, even though it's a similar sized town, because they're going to be more, it's like, oh, you want to plant, so I don't have to mow that anymore. You got it. And it really depends on the people on the ground and tying into those people. And if you can do it, let me know what you did, because I love to learn things like that. Anybody else?
I think there was another question here. Yeah. Are there oak species or shrubs that are suitable for smaller suburban yards? So I'm guessing
all
under a
of
quarter
them.
acre.
Every species. The smallest yard that I've planted a bur oak in, where they had plantable space, was 20 feet wide by 40 feet deep. And we put a bur oak in the corner. No, I'm sorry, wrong. Not a bur oak. It was chinkapin oak. And that was downtown Chicago. And as far as I know, today it's been in, that person just reached out to me last summer. Today, that plant, I believe, is about 40 feet tall. So it's, like I said, plants are going to space out into the space that's afforded them. So they may overhang open yards like your neighbors, and they're going to be mad at you. So you're going to have to take that into account. Things that have tighter crowns, when you hear people say the words half as wide as tall, usually when describing trees, that means it's a tree that's going to have a narrower crown and may be more suited to yards where space is an issue. So things like shingle oak, things like, oh man, things like what? Oh, persimmon is another one. That don't have a big footprint beyond typically a 30 to 40 foot wide kind of space. And for shrubs, frankly, you have to keep in mind that when you're planting shrubs, they're going to get big. A typical shrub's going to be 6 to 10 feet tall, and that's kind of unavoidable for scaling. So if you're planting these tiny little puffballs, typically the tiny little things are not as well adapted to broader sites. They're very specialized for particular habitats. So like the hypericums, I love using hypericum. They're beautiful, but they need very particular types of soil to be long-term successful. You're going to be okay with them for a couple of years, but typically they're going to burn themselves out, or in my particular case, get the snow load and they just shatter into 100 pieces. So you want to make sure that when you're planting things like that, that it's not too small for the space. That's a very large mistake that a lot of homeowners make when they have these big, tall houses and they plant trees and shrubs that are this big in front of it. And the thing to keep in mind is that a tree is a tree, a shrub is a shrub. Can't utilize one to satisfy things. Trees are going to have that canopy and it's going to be lifted up off the ground. So for smaller yards, trees are actually more appropriate than large shrubs.
Can I just
So
ask you on the topic of oaks?
Mhm.
Their roots,
What about
people come to me and they say, well, I don't want to plant oak trees,
them?
tear up my
You-
sidewalk.
okay.
It's gonna tear up." Can you give
Here's
me-
the thing about roots when it comes to foundation. You saw that the slide with all the oak trees right up next to the house.
Mhm.
The only reason oak is going to come into your house is not because they put a crack in your foundation. They're being good neighbors and they're saying, hey, look, you got a crack in your foundation. And they're going to exploit that. So in other words, the oak didn't break your foundation. You already had a shitty foundation. And the oak is just utilizing the space that you've made available to it. Now, when it comes to planting trees, if a tree has a circumference, of X big around, okay, and that the diameter of it is going to say it's 30 inches, all right. So that means 15 inches either side of center, roughly. But I planted 12 inches away from my house. Over time, it's going to come into my house. It's going to put pressure on my house. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that when I am choosing a place to put my tree that is far enough away from anything that it may impact over time. Now, roots are a different kind of thing. For every foot of height, a root is typically out 2 to 5 feet. So that means that if it's a 100-foot tree, the roots have a possibility. Now they don't always do this because they only go as far as they need to, but they have the possibility of being out 500 feet from the tree. And if you have multiple oaks, that root system gets much, 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 much bigger because now they've tied into one another and it's one continuous root system. So planting an oak in the yard, the funniest thing for me is like, oh, I can't plant oaks in my yard or next to my septic field, but I can plant them 10 feet away. Like the roots aren't going to go to where there's moisture and food and air. They're going to go to these places and they're going to utilize that space. Now, for pipes and people in older neighborhoods, yes, there's going to be some impact, but it's probably going to be negligible, especially with oak trees. It's the species like red maple, like sycamore, birches. They're going to be the ones that are going to clog your pipes. They're going to do a lot more damage because they need a lot more water. Pear is another one. They go for these spaces because they are, aggressive wetland species typically, and they need that food, that air, that moisture. And so they're the ones that are going to cause you more problems than a lot of the hardwoods. So things like sugar maple, like 90% of your oak species, Kentucky coffee tree, a lot of hackberry, a lot of your good native species, hickories and walnuts, they're not going to cause you real damage unless you planted them poorly on a weak slope or too close to the home. Or like if I plant it right up against the sidewalk, well, it's going to lift that sidewalk and chuck it into the street. So we want to make sure that we properly space them from impactful areas rather than not plant them at all.
So you wouldn't recommend them in a parkway?
I absolutely do, as long as the parkway is bigger than 6 feet.
Okay.
You just split it in the middle, lawn dart it. And please don't do that in your regular yard. Lawn darting is terrible. Usually people plant the tree right in front of their front door. Don't know why. Don't do that. But lawn darting it on a parkway is perfectly fine. In fact, I think the standard is 60 feet. You have to push your city to plant them closer. I recommend 30 feet, simply because I like shade and I don't like running my air conditioner.
So just quickly also, I wanted to point out for people that are asking about sizes or how tall a plant gets, or if you're worried it's going to cover a window or something like that. When you're using our plant finder, on the right-hand side, you can add a few plants to compare. So let's say you've got it down to like 2 or 3 choices and you're like, which one of these, how big does it get? One of the things that actually does compare is size. So you can definitely use our plant finder to answer those sorts of questions. And if you still had trouble narrowing it down, when you're talking to Kelsay, just always remember to take pictures. He definitely loves looking at pictures. And that really helps him. That really helps him just get to know your site, because he can tell other things that you might not be thinking of, like the lighting and the direction of lighting and things like that.
And,
So
sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah, I was just going to say, so even if your yard is super tiny, the picture should show the size of your yard, and he'll be able to recommend plants based on the size there.
The other thing I see here, the ComEd grant, Diane? Thank you
Yeah,
for
that's
pointing out that, yeah, the ComEd grants have opened up. I didn't know that they had opened yet. All right, and Mary Gelder, I think will be our last question for tonight.
Nice plants, Mary.
Thank you.
So, what was your question, Mary?
So I have asters in my rain garden, and
Yeah.
they're great plants, and I've heard that they're really beneficial, but they're not, they don't play nice with the other plants, and they tend to crowd out all of the other ones. And so I'm losing the diversity in my rain garden.
Yeah, asters in general, except for a select few, and now the asters have been split up. Asteraceae has been kind of moved around. There's Ooh Allen Lullaby, or whatever the hell it is now. There's a couple that stay home, but in general, asters go after disturbed ground, and most gardens are disturbed ground. So when you have these areas where you're going to be turning things over, or you have open bare dirt, as in a lot of us do, the asters are going to be some of the first ones to colonize that, both with seed and vegetatively. The only way that I've ever had any luck dealing with certain types of asters is actually pulling them. Now, they will suffer the occasional population crash, and they rarely come back from that. But typically when you're planting asters, they are species of opportunity. So make sure you know which one you're dealing with before you plant it, and do you have the space for it? If you're looking for the same benefit, I would go with some of our goldenrods, like elm leaf, zigzag, Rodelii, stiff. There's a lot of them that stay home, that don't move everywhere and stay more clumped. They flower at the same time, and they host just as many species of butterflies and feed just as many species as well. Goldenrod is an incredibly important species for monarch migration south. So I would recommend, for anybody considering asters, know the species that you're getting. New England aster is a really popular one, but if you think you need 3, you need 1. And so you want to make sure that you minimize your impact that way, and then utilize goldenrods and what's that late flowering eupatorium? Mist flower. Mist flower, and the genus and species. Just I'm bunting tonight. I'm sorry, guys. I'm failing, but that I would recommend going there first.
So Kelsay, if Mary say put like a ton of mulch, like 6 inches of mulch around, even more, like would that keep the asters down?
It actually encouraged the vegetative growth, and you'd have more of an ass kicking on your way than you would otherwise.
Well, we tried.
Yeah, don't do that. Yeah, the deeper the rich soil, the more the roots move around. If you really want an example, you can come to my house midsummer. You can pull until your arms fall off.
No, I have enough of my own.
Yes, yeah. Don't do that. Okay. I mean, I leave it because I don't care. It's not something that bothers me, but in certain areas where I'm trying to grow rarer plants for seed and for population stability on what we make available to people. I do have to do some work
Yeah.
around them, but in general, I make sure that I plant lots and lots of graminoid species. The biggest mistake a lot of butterfly gardeners make is they don't plant grasses. If you're planting a butterfly garden, 60% of the material that you put in the ground should be a graminoid of some kind. That is going to be your base structure for your butterfly garden, or even your pollinator garden. The bees and certain types of butterflies are going to utilize the pollen that the grasses produce just the same as they would otherwise. And you plant in amongst them, and you can plant them very, very tightly, a wide array of your standard flowering plants. Everything from Asclepias to Liatris come up in the shade of big blue stem. So, or dropseed or Alimus or whatever it is, they're built to come up in the shade of these grasses. So you do not have to fear, using too many grasses and not having the impactful garden that you think you might. Having thick grasses like dropseed and Alimus is going to keep down a lot of weed species, and your flowering plants will come up through them without any trouble. Just have to make sure that the flowering plant that you're using isn't shorter than the grass that you're utilizing. So if you're like, oh, I want butterfly weed, but I'm going to put it in with Indian grass. Well, I mean, it'll work, but you'll never see it. So if you're trying to make it an impactful statement, that's something to keep in mind. But in general, the grass will not retard your flowering plant to a detrimental degree.
Now, Possibility Place offers a package specifically for a pollinator garden.
We're working on it right now, actually, yes. We should have, we'll call it a generic kit. If for those just starting out, it will be a helping hand. I do recommend, furthering your plant use by utilizing things like the Plant Finder or, other sources, to put your species list together and do your math first. A flat of plants covers roughly 40 square feet. So the kit will be good for that size. It's built for, generality and for broadness of pollinator adaptability. So in other words, you have species that are all different kinds of species are going to be able to utilize it over a long period of time. And so if you have only 40 square feet, it'll be a good start for you, but it is flower heavy. So I would recommend further buying more grasses to go along with it, either from us or from another, solid source of material.
And what are some of the grasses that you most recommend? Little blue stem, you said?
I'm sorry, the species, it's all going to be based on your yard. Full sun prairie soils, drop seed it's a winner.
Mm-hmm.
Drier soils that are in full sun, little blue stem, great. But heavy clay and you're like, oh, it's dry, and you're going to plant little blue stem, I'm going to be happy to take your money, but you're not going to be happy with the results. So you might want to make sure that, that you prep a site, no rototilling,
Mm-hmm.
fracture your soil only, top dress, plant through it. Okay. That way you're letting gravity do the work to carry nutrient down, and you're planting through it, which means that you're artificially raising the soil level because now the compost is sitting on top and you're planting through it. So now instead of pushing it all the way down into that clay, you're artificially creating an A horizon, which is no longer either there or is in disrepair and needs help recovering. But that's soil science stuff. So I didn't know we were going into that tonight. Because clay is we could spend an hour on clay.
If you like it that much, you can come over and get some. I have some spare for you.
The science behind clay is really amazing. I mean, it's one of the few soils where there's actually covalent bonding going on between the particles, and that's how it locks up nutrient and becomes nutrient poor. That's why I'm using things like granulated sulfur and stuff like that help break that covalent bond and then open up nutrients to trees. I mean, it's pretty amazing stuff. And so, I mean, at some point, I would recommend for those interested to get a soil scientist and talk about it. There's a guy, was it Wanker? Oh, what's his name? He's out of McHenry County, and he does the geology and soils of Illinois. It's a fantastically weird talk. I highly recommend it.
Hey, Kelsey,
Yeah.
where can people send free soil tests, and do they need to do a
They
soil
don't have
test?
they don't give free soil tests anymore. You used to be able to send it to
Purdue.
well, Purdue, and to, I think they charge now, but it was your local soil and water conservation district would be the first place to check. I don't think they give free soil sample tests anymore, but I will tell you this, pH is one of those red herring that gets you to buy fertilizers. The trick behind pH is that as long as you're between 6.5 and 7.5, you're pretty much fine. You know, it's all a matter of water, aeration, fracturing your soil, mulching, doing the things that make soil healthy. Do not, no fungicides, miticides, or insecticides. When you add those things to your soil, you effectively take life out of the soil and therefore retard nutrient development. Stop that part. I get the use of Roundup. I get it. Do I recommend it? Yeah, maybe on your walk, keep it out of the cracks. But in your yard, using mechanical pulling means, unless it's like really out of hand and you need to do some spot work, you have to know what you're doing when it comes to that. But as far as soil goes, 6.5 to 7.5, pay attention to your water, mulch and compost. You should be fine. There are small things that you can do that will help. Granulated sulfur, maybe a big hit of nitrogen every couple of years. Big hit of nitrogen. I think you have to put it down to like 20 pounds per acre or something like that. I mean, it's a big honking. That's a lot. But maybe
I just add compost whenever I'm going to do a planting.
Yeah, but you also have like there's sometimes it doesn't always take because your subsoil is in such bad shape. That's why you want to fracture your soil, compost it, and then if it's woody material, you put down mulch. If it's not, if it's just grasses and forbs, no mulch. It robs nitrogen out of the soil and creates a vapor barrier that you don't necessarily want until the plants have established themselves. You want those roots to be out in the soil before you put down light mulch. And when you're picking your mulch, no cedar, no cypress, no dyes. Cedar and dyes retard root growth and do not decompose properly. And cypress, anybody that takes a 1,000-year-old tree to turn it into tiny pieces can go straight to hell.
Tell us what you think, Kelsay.
Oh, I got way worse thoughts than that. So it's just something to keep in mind that when you are doing your soil shopping, if you live in a town, who is here from Naperville? Is that Julie lady? Julie, I believe Naperville gives away mulch. You could back your truck up to it and you just shovel it in yourself. I've seen people shoveling it into station wagons. So find out wherever you live, get the nice double ground mulch. Typically, the cities have to do a particular thing because of emerald ash borer. No chip can be larger than 2 inches in any one direction. So you can get nice chipped up material and it decomposes just fine. And, I've heard people say, oh, well, I don't want, mushrooms. Well, you get mushrooms, you have healthier trees, shrubs, and perennials because that's what connects everything to the soil.
I have to be honest, guys. I have cypress mulch, so now Kelsey is going to fire me, but I didn't know. So don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just give us a call, ask us any questions. We won't judge you.
I am judging somebody.
Kelsey's judging, but he won't say.
I'll judge you. I mean, not harshly, but I'll judge you a little bit.
I didn't know. It was the only non-dyed mulch left, so I had to say.
God. No, dyed's worse. Dyed's way worse. I mean, what are we in kindergarten? It's like, I like Crayola red. Ugh. Might as well put down rocks. So for anybody else other than Sarah, steer clear of that kind of stuff and watch out for trendy mulches like cocoa, spent cocoa beans or whatever. They just don't do the job. You want things that decompose and feed the soil, not something that smells nice. If you want something that smells nice, grab a handful, keep it in your pocket. You'll smell like chocolate all day.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not recommending cedar because that actually like repels insects, right? That's why.
Well, no. Actually, that part I don't really care about. That's why people make fences and all that kind of stuff out of cedar. There's nothing wrong with that. If you don't want a lot of creepy crawlies on your deck, surround it with a little bit of cedar mulch. Great. The problem is that it retards root growth in the plants that you're using to cover it with. So you're not going to get the full benefit of the use of mulch for plants by using stuff like that.
Untreated, pure stuff. Got it.
Great.
Anybody else?
Is that
Well,
it?
thank you very much for having me, everyone.
Thank you very much, Kelsay.
If anybody needs to get in
Terrific.
contact me, you can get me through the website or give us a call. We're happy to help. The consults are free as long as it's virtual or you come to me. If I come to you, we'll talk.
Wonderful.
Pricing varies, but we want to make sure that that you actually lay your hands on the material and enjoy it.
So if we want some help with the space, we should like have pictures for you and dimensions, measurements.
Pictures, dimensions, and sometimes I can help, sometimes I can't. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is an earth moving issue. It's not what I do. I would recommend that anybody that has a general, you want to put together a plant list, a general sketch, absolutely. Send me a picture. But one picture, nice wide angle, maybe a little circle on it where you want me to look at it specifically and how it ties into, where you're going to be looking. Take the picture from where you're going to be looking at it from. If you take it from your neighbor's house, I am not going to be able to figure out what I'm looking at. So just make sure that, it is as easy for you as possible.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. This was terrific. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and join us on the 10th. Watch our website and watch our Facebook. We'll be giving you more information about our next speaker for our community webinar on the 10th. Thank you, and maybe by then it'll
Ray
be...
Wiggers. Oh, I'm sorry.
What'd you say?
His name's Ray Wiggers. That's what it was.
Ray Wiggers.
Ray Wiggers.
Not on the 10th. Not on the 10th.
But he's an interesting guy, and I don't know if he still does it, but he gave one of the most interesting geology-ish kind of talks that I'd been to in a while. God, I hope I had that name right.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm right. I'm pretty sure. I'm like 90% there. Sorry. Anyway, thank you for having me, everybody.
Hey, Kelsay.
Yeah.
Do you mind if we share this on YouTube in case people
Go nuts.
you again?
It'll be awful, but you got it.
You're gonna be a star.
Oh yeah. There'd be one from really far, far away. They're gonna have to train Hubble on me for like 6-8 hours just to get an exposure.
Good
All
night,
right, everybody.
everyone.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.